What's happening in China? We have the sales numbers for Tesla today in China. They seem disappointing, but let's just stop there. We're going to interpret these numbers. But in general, there's a question of what's going on in China. The economy in China is slowing down. Something is going on there. The central government is clamping down on businesses. We want to discuss this situation. China is a big market. China is a very difficult to understand market, and therefore also quite an interesting topic to talk about. This is not in wrong podcast. It's August 10, 2021. This is Delco. For the day, the fund is down 1.4%. The market's up 10 basis points. For the year, we are up 9.5%. The market is up 18.5%. We're underperforming by 9%. So let's first talk about the numbers. Tesla just released their numbers for China. Actually, they didn't release the numbers. It was released by various outlets. And let's not go to details here, but the numbers are out and they're probably roughly correct. So we're not going to question them. And the thing is, they sold roughly 8,000 cars in China, and they did produce something north of 30,000 cars. So the rest was exported. That's kind of the gist of the situation. And the first reaction is, of course, what is going on? Why are we so low in terms of selling 8,000 cars in China? And it's a fair question. This is not a good situation. Tesla is supposed to sell something in the mid-20s to 30,000 cars in China per month, and not just 8,000 cars. On the other hand, we have a production capacity of probably around 35 to 40,000 per month. So there is also a certain level of how much can they actually produce. And the first question is then, okay, are we in a situation now where we have less demand? Or is this just a situation where we have decided to produce more cars and export them into Europe? This is fundamentally the situation. I think the answer to this question is not very clear. It could be both ways. We don't know. But here's what we want to discuss more interestingly is that there is a situation in China. China has a problem. China is actually, in our view, having an economic slowdown. And this is driven by COVID. This is driven by the clampdown of the Chinese government to businesses like Tencent, Alibaba, etc. We all have heard of the stories. There is something going on in China, and I believe that this is a much more serious situation than most people think. People think about, let's say, the demand for Tesla is soft in China because of PR issues and things like that. I absolutely don't think so. If you look at the stock performance of competitors like NIO, for example, they have done even worse than Tesla this year. So this is not a situation where we have less confidence in the Chinese market for Tesla. I think overall the Chinese market is slowing down. Now we have, let's say, for example, news today that Huawei, for the first time since we follow Huawei, has had negative growth. We have, we know what's going on with Tencent, WeChat. We have situations like that all over the place. Fundamentally, what is going on is that we have a problem of a slowdown in China because of clampdown. If you are an employee at Huawei and you have negative growth, then you will not buy a Tesla. If you are concerned about buying a Tesla because the central government might look at you and consider you, maybe you're corrupt, maybe how come you made that money? How come you made money buying a Tesla? What's going on? So there are situations that I would say are perfectly plausible in China right now that make it a little bit more difficult particularly for goods like items like Tesla to be sold. What we mean with that is that China is a very I watch you, you watch me kind of society. And if you have a situation where the central government is clamping down on businesses for whatever reason, maybe you don't want to go out and buy something fancy Western. So I think this is probably one of the reasons why we have an issue with Chinese demand. By the way, it's not just Tesla. It's also NIO. If you look at the stock performance of NIO, it's actually worse than Tesla for the year, this year to date. I know this is a snapshot, it might not mean much, but if you look at the last few months, the stock performance is the same. So if Tesla is losing market share to Chinese competition, for example, which is one of the arguments that you could come out with and say, well, the competition is getting better and Tesla is losing ground, that's not the case. That's not what is happening. That's not what the stock market is telling us. The stock market is telling us that there is an issue with growth, in particular in China, and it is across the board. Now, I haven't looked at numbers like Starbucks or Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken. They have I think it's called Yum Brands China or something. They are very big in China, and they're always good proxies. I recommend them as proxies because they look at consumers, and of course the kind of consumer that buys Starbucks or Yum in China is probably fitting pretty well into a Tesla consumer, so it's a good proxy. We also, of course, haven't heard from Apple recently, but I wouldn't be shocked if Apple also has a bit of issues selling iPhones and all that stuff in China. So what we're trying to say here is that, and this is very important, the purpose of this podcast is to give people a feel for what it feels like, to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. It is very important to not be caught up by the headlines and try to look through the news and the noise and try to assess, okay, what exactly is going on here? What should we be worried about? What are the questions we should be asking? And the question that we should be asking Tesla, if I was exposed now to Elon Musk or the head of China, is not, what are you doing wrong relative to competition? The main question is, what is going on in the Chinese economy? Why is the economy slowing down? Why is the central government clamping down on businesses? Why is that happening? Now, we have a thesis at Orange Capital Partners. We discussed this in this morning meeting. And what's going on, and this is now a global thesis, it's a conjecture, very hard to prove with data, but it's a thesis, it's a working thesis, which as a hedge fund, you want to have sometimes these big global theses that just helps you navigate through the noise. The global thesis that we have is that the world is splitting into more liberal movements, and blockchain, for example, is one of those here in the US. So we have Silicon Valley, libertarian thinking, and the blockchain technology as a move away from government. And then we have the other side, which is more government. We have that at the small scale. Within the US, we have, let's say, states like Texas, which are going extremely on the side of freedom and individualism, and then we have states like California and even other states, Oregon, which are more collectivist. We have the same situation globally, and China is clamping down on businesses because there is a certain fear, there is a certain, let's say, a concern, I guess, by the powerful elite across the world that the power is slipping through the fingers. Power in many ways. Power, monetary power, information power, maybe not so much military power, actually, because that power is still monopolized within governments. But governments across the world, this is my point here, are losing power to other means technologies. And blockchain is just a symbol of that. Just to remind listeners, the blockchain technology, the way we understand it, is a decentralized way to organize money and identity. And if you decentralize money and identity, you're taking away a big lever of power that governments have across the world to just exert on their citizens. Money and identity, meaning what you own, who you are, what you can do, what you cannot do, all these kinds of things. That's what that's what governments do. And this blockchain technology is taking that away. If you look at the big proponents of, let's say, Bitcoin and generally blockchain, Ethereum, of course, it is exactly that drive towards more freedom. So to summarize, our big thesis here is that we have this move away from central power and government power, and then we have also typically when that happens, we have it goes one way, it goes also the other way, which is more central power. And this is manifesting itself extremely in China, because China is caught, I think China is exactly caught on that frontier, because you have a lot of tech innovation, you have a lot of Silicon Valley style innovation within China, but you also have the central government. Then on top of that, of course, you have a typical Chinese sort of local flair of government, which is also you have the local powers which are fighting with the central power. You have the local agencies and the agencies within the central power. So you have a lot of these infights. You have the army. That has been going on, of course, for decades. This is nothing new. What we're trying to say here is that there is this maybe this urge within the Chinese government just to centralize power and to go after the people who have the power. By the way, the same thing is happening here. When I said the people, what I mean is the tech innovation. Basically go after innovation, go after disruption, go after what is really disrupting the world. And of course, this is something we absolutely dislike, because this is our thesis, this is our raison d'être. We exist in order to invest in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. We exist because we want disruption. So this, of course, goes against our own thesis or our own raison d'être, which is fine. This is not new to us. We are used to this kind of thing. We just want to give ourselves and also our listeners a bit of a framework of how to think about this thing, what is playing out in China. So what does that mean now on a daily basis, returns and all that? First and foremost, we believe innovation and disruption is there's no throat to choke here. You can't choke throats here. This is the good thing about innovation. It will happen no matter what. Of course, there's always sort of the ultimate throat, which is things like wars or imprisonment, and the ultimate monopoly on violence is still held by governments. So we cannot neglect that. But let's say we stay in a sort of more civilized world where that is not the last resort. We believe that blockchain technologies, artificial intelligence, electric cars, and the CRISPR revolution, which is sort of what we're invested in, what we with the pie that we care about, that will keep growing. So that's good news. I think as far as the financial markets are concerned, we have a clear sign by the Treasury yield, which is still a good indicator, even though it's convoluted with the Fed intervention. We have a slowdown in the yields, meaning they came down, they went up to 1.8%, now they're back to 1.3%. I'm talking about the 10-year yield, and that is exactly in line with our thesis that we have a slowdown, we have a global slowdown that could be triggered by China, by the way, also by Japan. Also, not to forget is the COVID situation, which in both those countries is very serious, and those countries are clamping down on COVID very harshly for good or bad reasons. That remains to be seen. But if you make it more difficult for people to go to work, if you make it more difficult for people to live their lives according to what they're used to, then of course it's going to be more difficult to sell big ticket items. And therefore, we believe that the slowdown in China is a slowdown driven by the Chinese macro and not a slowdown by Tesla or some sort of unforced error, which certainly has been part of the story, but Tesla's made errors all the time. They keep making errors. That's what the company does. But the product is so good, the software is so good, the value proposition is so good that these small unforced errors actually don't make such a big dent in demand. We can see that in the US, we can see that in Europe. And the fact that they only sold 8,000 something cars in China, but still produced over 30,000 cars and exported everything, could also be very easily interpreted by, we have very strong demand in the US, we don't want to jeopardize that, so we don't want to export anything from the US, but we are exporting out of China. And that is a very good thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, we want to have a healthy Chinese market. We need a healthy Chinese market for a good Tesla performance, as well as a good economic performance globally. And we hope that will, like I said, you can't choke technology, you can't choke disruption and innovation. And we believe that the Chinese innovative spirit is strong enough to circumvent even this clampdown right now, which is happening in the central government. Thank you.